Hello, my name is Dr. Ivan Pavlov. I was born in a small village on the outskirts of St. Petersburg, and I've practiced medicine for over 6 decades. In that time, I've seen hundreds of thousands of patients, but nothing surprised me more than what happened to my own body after the age of 60. Let me take you back. I was sitting at my desk reading through a patient file when I went to stand up and noticed something odd. My legs didn't respond with the same strength. There was a delay. Not pain, not stiffness, just weakness. A strange, unfamiliar softness in my glutes and thighs, as if the muscles were asleep. At first I ignored it. I told myself, Ivan, you've been sitting too long. Maybe it's the weather, but over the weeks it became a pattern. Sitting for long stretches made standing up feel like a struggle. Climbing stairs began to require focus, and I realized this wasn't just aging, it was something deeper. You see, for many of us, aging is blamed for everything. It's just because I'm old, we say. But after decades studying human anatomy and observing seniors in Russia, the US, and around the world, I've learned aging is only part of the story. The real culprit is how we use, or don't use, our muscles. Especially after 60, every position we put our body in becomes either a tool or a trap. And the way we sit, that, my friends, is one of the most underestimated traps of all. I've had patients come into my clinic complaining about back pain, knee instability, or fatigue while walking. And do you know what I ask first? Show me how you sit. Their eyes widen. What do you mean? And I watch as they lower themselves into the chair, crossing one leg over the other, slumping slightly, letting their core collapse. There it is. We're taught that exercise is the key to strength, but we forget that posture, especially sitting posture, shapes our muscles every day, hour by hour. You can go to the gym 3 times a week, but if you sit in the wrong position for 6 hours a day, your legs are still weakening. For me, this realization changed everything. At 60, I began to study my own habits. How I sat during patient consultations, how I sat at home reading, how I sat during meals. And what I found shocked me. The positions I thought were comfortable were actually robbing strength from my glutes and thighs, the 2 most important muscle groups for walking, balance, and independence. This is what I want to talk to you about today, because this podcast isn't about scaring you. It's about waking you up, gently but firmly, to something that may already be happening in your body. You may think your legs are fine. You may think your weakness is just age. But I promise you, many times, it's how you're sitting that's speeding things up. So here's my question. How do you sit? Do you sit tall with your feet flat, your glutes engaged? Or do you slouch, cross your legs, or sink into a soft couch for hours at a time? In the next part, I'm going to tell you about the specific sitting position I beg you to avoid, and why it speeds up muscle decline faster than most people imagine. But for now, just ask yourself, if getting up feels harder than it used to, could your chair be part of the reason? Now let's talk about the sitting position that quietly, day after day, weakens your legs, especially your glutes and thighs. I call it the silent saboteur, because at first you feel nothing, but in time, the cost is enormous. And here it is, sitting with your legs crossed, especially at the knee and for long periods. I know. It seems harmless, maybe even elegant. People do it while watching TV, during long lunches, in church pews, waiting rooms. But I beg you, after the age of 60, this position becomes a hidden enemy. Let me explain why. When you cross your legs at the knee, one hip rises higher than the other. This creates an imbalance in your pelvis. Your spine subtly twists. Your glute on the elevated side shuts off. It's no longer engaged, no longer supporting your posture or bearing your weight. The muscle becomes inactive, and eventually it begins to atrophy. On the lower leg, circulation is restricted. Blood flow is reduced. Nerves can be compressed, especially the peroneal nerve behind the knee. You might not notice it at first. Maybe a little tingling, a bit of numbness. But over time, that nerve compression can interfere with the way your lower leg and foot communicate with your brain. The result? You're less stable. more prone to tripping, more likely to fall, all from a simple posture you probably never thought twice about. When I started looking into this, not just in my patients but in myself, I found that sitting cross-legged for even 20 minutes at a time caused subtle shifts in how I stood afterward. My weight leaned to one side, my left glute felt less responsive, and worst of all, I didn't even realize it was happening until I began actively testing each muscle group. This isn't about fear. It's about awareness. You see, the human body adapts to whatever you repeat. If you sit with poor posture daily, your muscles begin to memorize that pattern. Glutes that aren't activated become lazy. Thighs that aren't lengthened tighten. And what begins as a comfortable habit becomes a long-term dysfunction. Some people ask me, "But doctor, Pavlov, isn't it okay if I cross my legs sometimes?" Yes, sometimes. The problem is when sometimes becomes your default. When hours stack up each week, that's when the silent damage occurs. Another posture I warn against is reclining in a deep couch, with your legs stretched out and back slouched. This posture too allows your glutes to completely disengage. In that position, you're resting on your spine, not your muscles. Over time, your body forgets how to sit upright, how to engage the posterior chain, the glutes, hamstrings, and spinal erectors. And remember, after 60, your muscles don't bounce back as quickly. What weakens tends to stay weak unless you intervene. This is why I call this position a saboteur. Because it pretends to be comfortable. It lulls you into a relaxed state. But underneath that stillness, your body is losing the strength it needs to walk, to climb stairs, to remain independent. So please, if there's one thing you remember today, let it be this. Don't cross your legs at the knee. Don't recline for hours with your glutes asleep. Sit in a way that keeps you alive, strong, connected to your muscles. In the next part, I'll tell you exactly how I retrained my legs after 60. No gym, no equipment, just simple movements that reawakened my body. But for now, I urge you, uncross your legs, realign your hips, and remember, strength begins with how you sit. Let me tell you a secret. I didn't recover my leg strength in a gym. I didn't use any fancy equipment. No memberships, no machines, no supplements. Just discipline and daily awareness. When I noticed my legs getting weaker, I realized I had to treat myself like a patient. I had to examine my patterns, adjust my habits, and retrain my body from the ground up. So I started with one simple rule. Never sit for more than 30 minutes without moving. You'd be surprised how powerful that is. Every 30 minutes I stood up, stretched gently, walked a few steps and sat down again, consciously. Just this change alone woke up my glutes. They were forced to activate, to contract, to stabilize me as I moved. The second thing I did was begin isometric holds. These are tiny invisible exercises you can do while sitting. You don't need to stand up. You don't need to sweat. You simply engage your muscles and hold. Let me explain. While seated, I pressed both feet flat on the floor, knees at 90 degrees. Then I tightened my glute muscles, as if I were trying to lift slightly off the seat, and held that contraction for 10 seconds. Then I relaxed, then I repeated. At first, I could barely feel the contraction. My mind said engage, but the muscles didn't respond. That's when I knew how far they had fallen asleep. But I kept going. 3 times a day, 10 seconds per squeeze. And within 2 weeks, my brain-to-muscle connection came back. That's what people forget. Strength starts with the signal, not just the size of the muscle. Next, I added what I call the kitchen counter squat. Every morning, while waiting for the kettle to boil, I'd place my hands lightly on the kitchen counter and do 10 shallow squats. Nothing extreme, just a slow bend of the knees while keeping my heels on the ground and my chest upright. Why the counter? Because I needed safety, I needed balance, but I also needed activation. And this little movement, 10 slow squats every morning, rewired my body's memory. It told my glutes, wake up, we need you again. I also made one big change in how I sit. I switched to a firm, straight-backed chair, and I stopped reclining into softness. My hips were now aligned, my thighs were parallel to the ground, and I made sure my feet stayed flat. This position naturally encouraged my spine to stay upright and kept my glutes lightly engaged even at rest. But the most surprising discovery came from something I call micro-walking. Throughout the day, I stopped waiting for the right time to exercise. I simply added movement everywhere. I walked around the house during phone calls. I stood while reading emails. I paced while brushing my teeth. These moments added together became a quiet form of training, and they rebuilt the endurance in my legs, 1 minute at a time. So if you're listening now and wondering, but I'm too old, it's too late, let me say this. I was 60 when I started. I've had arthritis in one knee, I've had sciatica. But even with all that, I rebuilt my legs, with nothing more than awareness, discipline, and simple movements. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need to stop surrendering. And if you start today, just one glute squeeze, just one kitchen counter squat, your body will respond. It always does. There's a tragic pattern I've seen over and over in my years of practice, and perhaps you've seen it too. It starts small. A man tells me he doesn't take long walks anymore because he gets tired quickly. A woman says she avoids stairs now, just to be safe. Someone else chuckles that they need to push themselves up from a chair with their arms. They think it's normal. Just aging, they say. But then one day something shifts. They fall in the shower, they lose balance in a parking lot. They trip over a rug that's been there for 20 years, and suddenly their independence is gone. This happens more than you can imagine, and not because people are weak, but because they waited too long to take weakness seriously. I remember one patient, his name was George, 69 years old. Lived alone. He came to me for back pain, but I noticed how slowly he sat down, how he struggled to stand up from the exam table. I asked him, "How long have your legs been this week?" He laughed. "I don't know, Doc. They've just been tired lately." Tired. That's how it starts. Not pain, not injury. Just a quiet fatigue that creeps into your legs and never fully leaves. And George? 2 months later, he fell getting out of bed. Fractured his hip. He spent 6 weeks in rehab, lost confidence, moved in with his daughter. And I still remember what he said when I visited him. "I didn't know it was this serious until it was too late." That's what I'm trying to help you avoid, because there's a word you need to know: sarcopenia. It means loss of muscle, and it starts around age 30 but accelerates after 60. Most people don't notice because it doesn't cause pain. It causes decline. Silent, steady, invisible decline. You might think, "But I walk every day." Good. That helps. But walking alone doesn't always stop muscle loss, especially if you spend hours each day sitting in postures that deactivate your glutes and thighs. Here's the truth. You can be an active person and still have weak legs. Why? Because weakness isn't just about movement, it's about muscle use. Sitting wrong, moving mindlessly, letting your glutes go dormant, all of that contributes to slow, dangerous deterioration. And I get it. We don't like to think of ourselves as fragile. Especially those of us who've worked our whole lives, raised families, handled crises. We want to believe we're still strong, but real strength comes from honesty. From checking in with your body and asking, "Can I rise from a chair without using my hands? Can I stand on one leg for 10 seconds? Can I climb stairs without pausing halfway?" If the answer is no, that's not failure. That's feedback. And the time to respond is now, not after a fall, not after a hospital stay, not after the moment when walking becomes frightening. I've seen this happen in Russia, in the US, in people with money and people without. Weakness doesn't care about your background, it only cares how you live each day. But I've also seen the opposite, seniors who defy the odds, who walk with power into their 80s and 90s, and the secret is always the same. They never let their legs fall asleep. In the next part, I'll tell you exactly how to sit to keep your lower body alive. But for now, please remember, ignoring weakness doesn't make it go away. You've heard what not to do. Now, let's talk about what to do. If you want to keep your glutes and thighs strong after 60, the first step is simple. Sit like someone who still wants to walk. That means no lounging, no crossing your legs for long periods, and no slouching into soft cushions that swallow your posture. Instead, do this. Choose a firm chair, one that doesn't tilt backward. Sit with both feet flat on the floor, your knees directly above your ankles. Keep your back upright, not rigid, but naturally aligned. Your hips should be level, not tilted, and your thighs should be parallel to the floor or just slightly angled downward. This position may feel odd at first, especially if you're used to sinking into couches or perching with one leg tucked under the other. But give it time. You're not just sitting differently, you're retraining your nervous system. You're reminding your body, these muscles matter. Stay awake. Now here's a powerful tip. While sitting like this, practice micro-activation. I do this daily. Tighten your glutes gently, hold for 5 seconds, then release. Do this 10 times while you read, talk, or even sip tea. No one will notice. But your muscles will. This tiny act sends a signal to your brain. These muscles are still in use, and over time, that signal builds strength. Want another trick? Try sitting on the edge of the chair for part of your day. When you perch slightly forward, keeping your spine tall, your core engages naturally and your glutes stay lightly activated. It's a posture used by many traditional cultures, and one that promotes constant low-level engagement of the posterior chain. Now, let's talk habits. Here are 3 daily habits I live by, and that I urge you to try. First hour, no couch. After you wake up, spend the first hour of your day in an upright position. Make breakfast standing. Read the paper in a firm chair. This sets the tone for the day. 10 squats twice a day. You don't need to go deep. Use the kitchen counter or a wall for support. Just bend the knees gently, push through the heels, and feel your glutes work. Sit with intention, not by default. Before you sit, ask, where am I sitting? How am I sitting? Will this posture build me or break me? If the answer is negative, adjust immediately. These are small acts, but they have large consequences. I've seen men in their 70s reverse chronic instability simply by changing how they sit. I've seen women in their 80s rebuild the strength to climb stairs again, not through medicine, not through magic, but through posture, movement, and intention. Remember, muscles are living tissue. They listen to how you live. If you treat them like they're retired, they will retire. But if you treat them like they still have a purpose, they'll surprise you. And if you're thinking, but Ivan, I've already lost too much, let me say this clearly. It is never too late to reclaim strength. Not if you change your posture, not if you move with awareness, not if you sit with dignity. The next time you lower yourself into a chair, I want you to pause, feel your body, align your spine, plant your feet, squeeze gently, because from now on, every time you sit, you're also standing up for your future. Your legs are not gone. They're waiting for you to wake them up, and that starts right now.